Hi, Christy. Thank you so much for joining me. You want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah. So thank you so much for having me. I am Christy Plott. I am one of the owners of American Tanning and Leather based in Griffin, Georgia. And my family and I, we're a fifth generation family business, and we tan alligator and crocodile leather. And we supply skins and hides and leather to people, leather crafters, large and small, across the United States and around the world, and to luxury brands around the world. And I'm just excited to be able to share a little bit of information on these special leathers to your listeners.
Perfect. Well, thank you. So you are here today to kind of give us a crash course on the crocodilian species that you guys offer. So before we do that, do you want to kind of give me like a little bit of a sales pitch on why leather crafters should consider making their products out of any of these species?
So, alligator and crocodile leather is considered to be the world's finest luxury leather. And it has been used for centuries by craftsmen to produce footwear, bags, belts, any other type of accessory, furniture, automobile interior, you name it. And the use of this leather is directly tied to the ecological benefits to our planet, such as conservation of wetlands, conservation of crocs and alligators, and conservation of the 8,000 species, at least in the United States and Louisiana, the 8,000 other species of plants and animals that live alongside them. And that is because alligators and crocodiles and reptiles in general can only survive in their original habitats. And so if we want to utilize those reptiles and we want to be able to keep them around, tanneries like myself, we need a continuous supply of these reptiles. So we have to make sure that their habitats are intact so that the animals can survive. So it is the only leather anywhere in the world that its use contributes to habitat preservation and habitat conservation, which is pretty cool. The other thing that I like to tell leather goods crafters is that every single part of these animals is used, just like cowhide leather. Beef is eaten and the leather is used. Alligator is eaten and the leather is used. So, every year the alligator industry puts more than 1 million pounds of alligator meat into the U.S. food supply chain. And it's a really popular thing to eat, particularly around the South. If you've ever been to Florida or had it, you should definitely try it because it's pretty good. So the skin is used for leather. The teeth are sold. The heads are sold. And even now the blood and the collagen and other byproducts are being used for medical research. And so the alligator and crocodile industry has been recognized by the UN environment as being like the world example of sustainability for and for conservation of species. So that's something that I want people to, if they consider using alligator, that they can understand that this industry and people like myself, we're doing everything possible to ensure that we're using the highest quality of the highest level of science-based animal welfare on farms. We're doing continuous research to get better. And again, everything we're doing is directly tied and linked to conservation of these species, and we're being recognized as doing a good job. On a financial front, when you start thinking about leather goods makers, like you guys that make saddle stitch or handmade items, you can only produce what your two hands can produce. For many of you, there's no machines involved, and you're doing things, in the oldest of old school ways, and you're really using your two hands to craft beautiful leather goods. Well, if you are making a product out of cowhide and you can sell that product for $100 and it takes you, whatever it takes, 5 hours to make it or longer, I guess. But if you make that same product out of alligator and you use your same two hands and the same amount of time, you can sell that product for $600 or $700. So it's something for people to consider because your time is valuable, and people know that alligator leather, again, it is that top tier luxury leather. So what I want to do is I want to break down some of the things to people and give them some information so that they're not so afraid to give it a go or to give it a try. because it's just like working with regular leather. It's just more expensive. So
awesome. Well, thank you so much. So could we maybe kind of go through the different species that are available at AM-Tan and kind of talk about the variability between them and maybe some recommendations on when you might consider one versus the other?
Okay. So obviously in our company name, it's American Tanning and Leather. So we are really, really specialized in American alligator. First and foremost, because we're able to get it in the United States, and because we're an American company and we really want to try to sell American items. However, we do also offer crocodile skins from saltwater crocodile, which come from Australia or Papua New Guinea, or we offer Nile crocodile, which might come from Zambia or Zimbabwe or South Africa. So let's start by talking about, let me just give you, first of all, let's talk about alligator. With alligator, you can have either wild alligator or farm-raised alligator. There is pretty distinct difference in them that wild alligators are typically larger skins, larger pieces of leather, and farm-raised are typically smaller. And Nile crocodile, most of those that we're going to have, all of those that we're going to have here are all going to be farm-raised, so they're going to be smaller skins. And the same thing with porosis, they're all going to be farm-raised. So the first thing I want to talk about is that on American alligator versus crocodile. So I'm going to use, when I use crocodile, I'm going to be talking about Nile and saltwater or porosis crocodile. I'm going to refer to saltwater crocodile as porosis. But they're the same thing. So that you have with these animals, you have their scientific name and their common name. But I'm going to use porosis for saltwaters, and I'm going to use Nile when I talk about Nile. But I lump them together and call them crocs. So alligator versus crocs. Let's just talk about the shape of the skin itself. So alligator is going to have a longer, more rectangular shaped body and a wider tail than crocs. And on wild alligators, they're going to have an even longer body than a farm-raised animal. So if you were to take a wild alligator, a farm-raised alligator, a farm-raised Nile croc, and a farm-raised porosis, and they're all the same size, centimeter for centimeter by the way we measure them, and you put them on a table, you would see that the biggest skin is going to be the alligator. You're going to see that you're going to have more leather, more cutability on that alligator. You're going to see that the farm-raised alligator has the widest tail, but a shorter body than the wild alligator. So I hope I said that right. So the wild alligator compared to the farm-raised alligator is going to have a longer body. So longer body on the wild alligator, shorter body on the farm-raised alligator. More narrow tail on the wild alligator, fatter tail on the farm-raised alligator. But the tail on both of those is still going to be bigger than the croc. And that's just the way the animal itself is shaped. In terms of the scale shape on the animal, the crocodiles have very sort of rigid, very angular, very rectangular, sharp edges on the squares on the center of the tile in the belly. And alligators have a slightly more rounded shape on their center square shapes, a little bit more organically shaped, if you will. Kind of hard to describe it without showing it to you guys, but if you were to put them side by side, you would completely see it right away. On crocodiles, they have a small, tiny little dot at the bottom of each scale, and alligators don't have that. So that's the main difference. Then you want to try to get into farm-raised versus wild alligators, and I want to kind of explain that to people. So wild alligators typically range in sizes between 30 centimeters wide across the belly and 99 centimeters wide, which is a range of about 4 foot long to about 12 foot long. The average wild alligator is going to be about 7 foot long, which is going to be about 45 to 52 centimeters wide. That's average. And wild alligators tend to have more scars and natural imperfections due to the fact that they're just aggressive reptiles and they're territorial in nature. They fight with other alligators. Farm-raised alligators are typically around the length of around 3 to 4 feet, which is around 22 to 29 centimeters wide. And those skins, for the most part, are used in the watch strap trade, in the leather goods trade. But, there are some farms that are producing skins that are size 30 to 34 or 35 to 44 centimeters, which would be used for footwear or handbags or things like that. So I don't know if that's the kind of information that you guys are looking for, but I think it's useful for leather goods makers to know.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you kind of comment a little bit about the difference between the species in terms of maybe ease of use and also just kind of like quality? Like, I think kind of the common idea is that maybe the Porosus is considered like the highest quality. Like, is that true, or kind of?
It's certainly the most expensive. Okay. So the reason for that is that there are Porosus saltwater crocs are highly, highly aggressive animals. They are. There's not that many people that are raising them in Australia or Papua New Guinea. It's just a handful of farms. Most of those farms are supplying, and controlled by some luxury brands throughout the world, like Hermes. Some of them are owned by Hermes. But the volume of crocs, not Porosus crocs, is not the same volume as American alligator. And the other thing about Porosus is that, in the U.S., it's only legal to import species from Australia or Papua New Guinea. But there are Porosus that are farmed in Singapore and Indonesia, but they're just not legal to come into the U.S. So that certainly makes them more expensive because the availability of them is less. I think it just has to do with a person's personal preference on what they like. So the Porosus, when you take a look at Porosus from afar compared to alligator, you'll notice that even on a very big Porosus skin, the scale pattern is very small. So it's very small scale. I think they used to call them small scale crocodile back in the day. So if you were to take like a 50 centimeter Porosus, which is a big Porosus, you don't have very many in that size because they're not farmed, on these massive sizes really. But if you were to take a look at a 50 centimeter Porosus and a 50 centimeter alligator, what you'll notice is there's a lot more scales on the Porosus than there are on the alligator because they're smaller, so there's more of them. So typically it goes like this. The most expensive is Porosus, and then it's alligator, and then it's Nile crocodile. But of course, everything is in relation to quality. If you wanted to talk about the rarest thing that a leather goods manufacturer could get their hands on, it would be a very large, wild alligator in perfect quality because there's not very many of them. It's like a flawless diamond that you would have in perfect e-color. So that's the rarest. I guess the thing that I should start by saying is because I've referenced centimeter sizes on these things, and most leather goods makers are used to working in square feet, I think, yeah?
Yeah, that's generally how it's sold.
Okay, so alligator is not sold by square feet. It is sold by the size in centimeters. And it is not square centimeters like you guys are used to talking about square foot, but it is sold in linear centimeters. And the way it's measured is we basically take a measuring stick in centimeters, and we measure that alligator or crocodile at the widest point across the belly. The length of the skin, of the whole skin, is quite honestly, it's irrelevant. But if you want to figure that what the skin size is, if you want to think about the length, if you take the length in feet and multiply it by 6.65, that'll give you the approximate width in centimeters. And it's just a guide. Think about it this way. There's a lot of people that are 6 foot tall that have a 30-inch waist, and there's some 6 foot people that have a 50-inch waist. So
it's a good way to look at it.
Yeah. So it's not a one size fits all thing, but in general, that's what you can figure. So they're measured across the belly at the widest point in centimeters, and you can sort of figure that if a skin is 30 centimeters wide, you're going to have roughly a square on that belly size to cut in. So if it's 30 centimeters wide, because of the way that the shape of the animal narrows at the top of the legs and the bottom of the legs and the belly, you're not going to have a 30 centimeter by 30 centimeter cuttable skin size. You're going to have probably like a 27 or 26 by 26 cuttable skin size. So it's a couple centimeters in if you want to consider that. But in that center, you will have a wider size to cut from. So you'll also notice that the size ranges, we as tanners categorize the size ranges of alligators in 5 centimeter increments. So you'll notice that when we put things on our site, we say skins are between 30 to 34, 35 to 39. And that's just an industry standard. And the industry size ranges goes like this: 0 to 19, 20 to 24, 25 to 29, 30 to 34, 35 to 39, 40 to 44, 45 to 49, 50 to 59, okay? And then it goes 60 to 69 and 70 and up. So, and that's not just me at American Tanning and Leather Company. That's my partner tannery, White Line in Italy. That's HCP. That's Hang Long. That's any of these other tanneries around the world. They're going to categorize alligator and crocodile skins in those same size ranges. And if you order a skin in size 30 to 34 centimeters, you need to understand that you can get a skin between 30 and 34. We try as tanners to get right in the average size of 32. But let's say you're producing footwear and you need a 33 centimeter skin. Okay? You shouldn't order 30 to 34 because you might get some that are 30, 31, and 32. You need to go up a size range, 35 to 39, or you need to tell the tanner, I need really at minimum 33. And leather, when we put it in the drum, we might take a crust skin, which is undyed, unfinished leather, and we put it in the drum, and we've checked the crust measurement, and it could be 32. Well, leather shrinks and expands and moves. It's an organic thing. So when it comes out of the drum, it might be 31 after we finished it, or it might be 34. So that's why we need that 5 centimeter size range as a tannery to work in, because we don't have a crystal ball to know exactly what size it's going to be before we dye it and after we dye it.
Good information.
Yeah, so I wanted to again, so if you figure, so people always ask me, they say, well, how long is a 32 centimeter alligator? How long is one? Well, it's about 4 to 5 feet, really 4.5 to 5 feet long. So if you take that 32 centimeter size and you divide it by 6.65, that gives you 4.81 feet. So that's the width. So 32 centimeters wide, which is about 12 inches wide, by almost 5 feet long. That's the size.
Can I ask real quick, and that formula is applicable for both farm and wild?
It's a little bit more applicable to wild skins, than farm raised skins, because farm raised skins are grown much faster than wild skins, so they're going to be shorter. They're going to be shorter. But you're going to have, again, on a farm raised alligator, you're going to have a wider tail, so you're going to have a little bit better. You're going to have more, definitely, on a farm raised. All right, so just going into a couple of other things that we were talking about on farm races, wild alligators. The other thing that people should know is that wild alligator skins are typically they're going to have more scars on them. The tails are going to be more scarred, and we don't include the head or the tail on wild skins in the grade. Why? Because the tails are usually pretty torn up. Alligators are territorial animals. They fight with each other, and they're going to have more scars and natural imperfections on them. Larger alligators also tend to develop as they get older. So on big alligator skins, you'll see that they'll develop these small circular shaped calcium deposits, or bones really, called osteoderms, in the upper part of their bellies and necks. It's definitely considered a detail, a defect on these wild skins. The other things that you might see are these small circular dot type marks between the scales of the flanks on the side, on the small pebbled scales on the flank on the side of the alligator. You'll notice sometimes these little dots, and it looks like something has bored a little hole in it. And those are actually left there by leeches. So we call those parasites. Those are also considered a leather defect. I think cowhides have something called, they call them tick marks or whatever, that are typically left there from bug bites or barbed wire fences. So the average wild alligator is probably 15 to 20 years old. And one cool thing about a wild alligator, these all have tags on the end of the tail. So all crocodilians that are sold in the leather market, they will have a tag, a plastic tag on it that has a serialized number on it. Most of our alligators that we're selling come from Louisiana. So if there is a tag and you have a tag from an alligator that's from Louisiana, you can really easily spot or know that it's a wild skin. If you look at that tag number and the number is 50,000 or under, it's a wild alligator. If the number is over 50,000, it's a farm-raised alligator. That's from Louisiana. So that's a good telltale, easy way that you can tell just by looking at the tag.
Telltale. I like that.
No pun intended. And then farm-raised alligators, most of those, again, are between 22 and 29 centimeters, and they're used really for the watch strap industry. But there are some farms, and you'll notice when we call skins, we call them the flawless skins. And you'll see, like on our site, we'll call them that, or on our Instagram. Those flawless skins are the ones that are farm-raised alligators that are raised in individual living enclosures. So they're not raised in communal pens. They're raised completely in like a little apartment-style living enclosure. And before you say that that's mean, you have to understand that alligators are very territorial, so they're actually quite happier. And they're quite happy living in a little individual living enclosure. But they're perfect. From the top to bottom, they're really perfect. And they don't have any scars or anything like that when they're raised like that. And they are truly flawless. And they cost a fortune. So.
Okay. All right. Awesome. So, I got a couple more questions on grading. So I think one thing to understand that I read on your website is like the quality of the leather is the same across all of the grades, correct? Like there's no differences in the tanning process. You're specifically talking about defects. Is that accurate?
Yeah, for the most part. Listen, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that tanners don't make mistakes.
Sure. We
make mistakes all the time, just like you guys make mistakes.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So, but generally, when we're grading skins, or when we tan skins, we don't tan grade 1 skins one way and grade 2's another and grade 5's another. They're all tanned in the same batch. So what happens when we receive skins in the tannery is we grade them once in raw, okay, and then we start them in process, and that's all the grades get put in. They're actually processed in batches according to how big they are, because we don't tan little bitty skins with great big skins. And then so they're processed in batches according to how big the skins are. And then once they come out and they're in crust, which is undyed, unfinished, tanned leather, we will have some tanning defects, which I like to call those on our website. We call those the oops skins. I mean, it's just, we mess things up in the tannery. Sometimes we have dyes that go wrong, dye colors that go wrong. We have skins that can get hung in a shaving machine, or skins that can get hung in the drum somewhere, and something can happen, and there can be defects in those. Or we can have skins that have issues from the raw material where they have like some grain damage or something like that, because the skins were what we call slipping, which is starting to decompose because they weren't properly salted. So we definitely make a differentiation between that, but you can downgrade for those types of things. But in general, the leather is the same. The finishing is the same. It's just natural defects that you have to cut around. So alligators and crocodiles, again, by nature, they're territorial animals. So, both farmed and wild skins are predisposed to have some type of natural imperfection. And those types of blemishes in crocs and alligator skins range from cuts, skinning cuts, because they're not easy to skin. Some of these animals weigh up to upwards of 800 pounds apiece. So it's and skinners can make mistakes, to scars. both healed scars and open scars. So just like you or me, if we were riding a bike when we were a kid and we fell down and we skinned our knee, we may have that scar for the rest of our lives. Now it's healed over, so that would be a healed scar. But when, right fresh when it happens, it's what we would call an open scar, or, a wound that's not quite healed. So if that animal, that wild alligator or a farmed alligator is culled at the time before that thing is healed, it's going to be an open scar in tannery. And then usually, just like if you have a cut in your blue jeans and you put it in the washing machine, it's going to become a bigger hole. The same thing happens in the tanning cycle. So an open scar will typically open up to be a hole or something like that in the alligator. You can see that parasite damage in wild skins, the leeches, the osteoderms, which are in the chest. And we grade, in this industry, alligators and crocodiles are sorted into 5 grades. Grade 1 being the best and grade 5 being the worst. And so we grade like this. We have a grade 1, which is really a perfect skin. On a wild skin, a grade 1 is going to only look at the belly. The head and the tail is not included in that. On a farm-raised skin, a grade 1 will include the head and the tail. And then we have what we call a grade 1-2, which is, it's really essentially a grade 2, but it's a grade 1/2, a grade 2/3, 3/4, and 4/5. So 5 grades. And in general, the way you grade is you take a look at the belly, you visually divide that belly into 4 quadrants. And if you have all 4 quadrants are clean and free of defects, it's a grade 1. And if all 4 quadrants have defects, it's a grade 4/5. So basically, as you find, so it can be any type of defect. So if you have a belly that has defects in 1 quadrant, that would be a 1/2 grade. And it can be any type of defect. It can be a hole. It can be a cut. It can be a scar, healed or open. It could be an osteoderm. It could be leeches. It could be grain damage. It could be wrinkling. It'd have to be pretty severe wrinkling for me to downgrade an alligator skin, but it can be a number of things. And I will also even downgrade for like a blob of dye or something like that. Like let's say we were dyeing something and we had a dye mishap and then there's a blob spot in one area. Well, it could be a perfect skin, but I'll downgrade it to a grade 1-2. As skins get bigger, and particularly on wild skins, we get a little bit more lenient on the grade. Because you can't look at a small 30 centimeter skin that's, been raised on a farm. You can't grade it in the same way that you're grading a 12-foot wild alligator. You have to take, and I try to tell people like this. So like if we were having a beauty pageant, okay, and we lined up 50 of the most beautiful women in the world, you and I might have differences in opinion over who is the most beautiful. We might be able to pick out the top 10 most beautiful, but we might have differences of opinion about what is the most beautiful. So again, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and we do try to look at what's going to work best for each type of leather good. So farm-raised alligators, for example, are predisposed to having some type of umbilical scar defect, and that's because they're hatched in captivity and they can have sort of like a wider umbilical scar. Well, that works perfectly fine for for watch straps, because they don't cut there. But for a wallet maker, it might not work. It's kind of an ugly place. So we try to sort those out, and it might be a grade 1-2, but it's a 1-2 that might not work for someone making shoes or someone making wallets. So again, we try to sort out for those types of things. Let's see. Again, farm skins are more expensive because they have less defects. We're grading the heads and the tails, and of course, they cost a lot of money for farmers to raise. Some of these big, flawless farm-raised alligators are raised on farms for 5 years.
Wow. So I wanted to just make sure that I'm understanding something right, or at least point out something that's worth considering. So in terms of like scarring, so you mentioned there's healed scars and then open, I guess, scars or wounds. And I guess, one thing I didn't consider is when you're looking at maybe a lesser quality skin, a few grades down, like you could probably work with healed scars because the grain isn't broken, right? Whereas, yeah.
Absolutely. And that's, listen, I personally think that those types of healed scars and imperfections are kind of a hallmark of the life of that wild animal.
Yeah, for sure.
It's how you know it's real. I mean, if it's, your alligator skin wallet, if it's made from a wild alligator and it has a healed scar on it, it's part of it's part of that animal's history and its life, and it also shows someone that it's real. This is a real alligator. This thing, it didn't. It's not
battle scars.
Yeah, man. This is man stuff.
Yeah.
I tell people like this, these are not bunny rabbits.
You're right.
These are But yes, I mean, listen, you can work around. You can work around anything that's not a hole or a cut, and if you, depending on what you're making, you can work around even holes and cuts. A long time ago, when leather goods makers there were no farm raised crocs or alligators. This is a relatively new thing. This only started happening around, in the 1980s. In the early 80s is when people started farming alligators and crocodiles. It didn't happen before then, but a long time ago, you'd see bags in the 50s and 60s and 40s and whatever. Before alligators and crocs were put on the endangered species list, it was used then. And what these leather goods makers in France used to do is they would have several skins, and they had, one that had a really beautiful belly, but maybe there was a scar or a hole or a cut. And they would take the skin of another animal, they would cut out that individual scale from the good one, and they would plug it in the place where the other skin had a bad place. So they would literally, there'd be a hole or a cut or something, they would just replace the scales.
Huh.
Can you imagine how much time that took?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And the detail of how they would have to skive it out and perfectly fit it. It's like putting together a puzzle. That's what they used to do.
Wow.
People don't do that today, and quite honestly, there's very few people in the world that even know how to do that anymore. But
yeah, no kidding. Okay.
Yeah. So, So as I tell people, like when you're first starting out, like even a grade 4 or 5 alligator can have just healed scars. Like just like I was saying, like if you're talking about I could say, okay, look, it's a 4 or 5 because there's defects in all 4 quadrants, but they might be all healed scars. And to a leather goods maker who's making a wallet or something, he may say, you know what, that works perfectly fine. So not all 4 or 5s are going to be, really terrible. They're just not. But we have to have some type of a grading scale, and you have to remember that most of our industry and most of our market are really for like very, very high-end luxury brands who are selling some of these bags for $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a piece.
Right.
And I don't have the, I have to be sort of absolute when I grade. I don't want to ship a shipment of, 1,000 skins over to a customer in Europe, and then they get over there and we have some dispute on the grade. So you have to have some standards on this stuff, but also grading is subjective. And what works for one brand might not work for another. I'll give you a perfect example. I love and really value my relationship with our customer, which is Lucchese Boot. And they came out with these, the idea to really utilize these giant alligators. I mean, we're talking 12-foot alligators. They're 90 centimeters plus wide across the belly. They're huge. And nobody else really in the industry was really using these big alligators. And so we had alligators from several years of harvest stacked up here, but they're all, they're big alligators. They've lived a long time. They have all kinds of defects and cuts and scars and things in them. And Lucchese said, these things are cool. These are great. We're just going to put this right in the pattern. If it's got a little small scab or open thing on it, who cares? It's cool. This is an alligator, this is an alligator boot. It's still really high quality leather. This thing is still, it's still really valuable and it looks really awesome. So they were able to start using these scars and things and just celebrated them. And they show their customers that every pair is different. The scale pattern on every pair is different. So, whereas if you were to go into an Hermes shop and look at a Birkin bag, it's going to be the same every single time. And they're going to look for that perfect skin, and they're sorting through thousands and thousands and thousands of skins to find those skins that work perfectly for their bags. Now, that Hermes, alligator bag is going to be $60,000, whereas Lucchese is selling their giant gator boots for anywhere between $850 to $1,500. So it's a totally different price point. Still right. Alligator, and it's still so leather goods manufacturers have to decide, do they want to go after that ultra high end market? And if they do, they're going to have to pay an ultra high price. But I personally think for leather goods crafters, you can still make an alligator wallet out of a lower grade skin, a grade 2-3, a 3-4, a 4-5, and you can still sell that wallet for $400, $500, $600. You may not be able to get $1,800 or $2,800 for it, as Hermes does, but you can still command a pretty high price for that because people understand how special it is, how difficult it is to tan, and also that it's a more expensive leather. So
awesome. That's such good information. Thank you. All right. So are you ready to maybe tackle some of the different finishes you've got available?
Yeah. So we have I'm trying to be like a little bit more generic in nature than just talking about finishes that our tannery makes, because I want them to be able to use this, even if they're not in the United States and they're not buying from us and they're buying from someone in Europe or in Asia. I want them to be able to, this information to translate for them.
Okay.
So there's the two main finishes on alligator and crocodile leather are glazed finish and matte finish. So glazed finish, we at American Tanning call it our classic finish, is the oldest and most classic way to finish alligator. It is a high gloss shine finish, and it has like a glass-like touch, and it is achieved by polishing the skin using a machine called a glazing jack. And the arm of the glazing jack polishes the skin with a cylinder, a stone cylinder. And some people, like in calf skin, if it's glazed calf, I think they use glass. We use an agate stone. That's what everybody who polishes these are. Glazed leather is somewhat stiff. It's a little bit hard, should be firm. And it's best used for belts and small goods and bags. One of the benefits of glazed leather that it can be further glazed and what's called bombé, like a French bombé, by a master artisan. It is a protein finish, glazed finish, so that means it should not get wet. If it gets wet, you're going to kill the finish. So you cannot get it wet. And as glazed finish wears, it's going to get duller over time. It's going to get a patina. So kind of like fine sterling silver gets that patina of age, that's what glazed finish does. It's going to dull down over time and you'll sort of get that patina. It might darken a little bit. You should be careful not to use hand creams or put anything on glazed leather. You need to keep it dry, keep it temperature and humidity controlled. But if you take care of it the right way, it's going to last forever.
Can I ask a quick question? So not to get kind of weird here, but like if you were to use glazed alligator for something like a wallet, like a common issue that happens is, people sweat. Is there any concern about water damage from just typical sweat,
Look, yeah, I mean, listen, it can, for sure. It will darken it and it will dull it. But again, that's part of the beauty of the leather, of wearing it, of using it. It's not going to stay that crisp and pristine over time. It's going to wear in. It's going to change. The leather is going to change in age. Just like, veg tan leather is going to get darker over time. Right. Our leather that we make is all chrome tanned leather. So chrome, for those of you who don't know, chrome is a natural mineral found in the earth, and it's used to transform raw skins into leather. The benefits of chrome tanned leather is that it has excellent light fastness, and it allows the leather to be dyed almost any color because it's a white crust. It's a white leather. And chrome leather is softer and more pliable than veg tan leather. So it allows tanners like me to have a greater range of finishing options for clients. So you will very, very, very rarely see any alligator anymore that is tanned or even retanned as veg tan leather because we're so limited to the colors that we can make with it, which is black, brown, and peanut. We used to make a lot of it. Like back in the day, we used to do a lot of veg retanning, but we don't do that anymore. Occasionally now we do it just for nostalgia purposes, and we'll have some veg retan crust that we'll offer, but it's pretty rare. So the second finish after glaze finish is matte finish. We call that our desert finish. Matte finish is a more, it's a pretty durable finish. It's like your regular leather, your regular sort of saddle leather finish. So it's a little bit more durable, a little bit more weather resistant. It is a smooth finish, and it is sort of silky to the touch. Whereas glaze finish, again, classy to the touch. The matte finish is more silky to the touch. Some other tanners call it safari finish. We call it desert, but it's oil and water resistant, and it is recommended for all types of leather goods, upholstery, and especially boots and shoes. It is generally the easiest leather for leather goods makers to get started with because it doesn't require any special handling during manufacturing.
Okay.
Glaze leather, you should probably cover it with saran wrap or something like that, or wear some gloves while you're making it because it can actually fingerprint if you've got grease or oils on your hands. So most people, for example, like if you go in any fine leather goods manufacturing operation in France or Italy, you'll notice if they're making anything out of glazed leather, they have taken a plastic and covered that glazed leather during the manufacturing process to protect it from fingerprinting and smudging or anything like that.
Good to know.
Then you have Millennium Finish. And Millennium Finish is it's in between glazed and matte. Okay, so it's a little softer like the matte finish, not quite as stiff, but it has a higher shine than matte finish. And Millennium Finish was created for bags that have to be made inside out, and then you have to flip them because glazed finish you can't do that with. Well, okay. I can't say that you can't do it because there are people that do it, but it's very, very difficult. Okay. Because you can make the finish break. And then we have garment finish, and garment finish is it's our most expensive finish because when we make garment finish, we have to mill it at the end, and we lose a lot of centimeters. So we have to charge more per centimeter for it because the leather actually shrinks. It also has to be shaved, thinner, which costs us more money. It's a lot more risk. We put in more oils in the drum, which again are expensive. But garment finish was developed by tanners to be used specifically for garments, for jackets, skirts, pants, and for really, really soft handbags. And each skin is shaved very thin by a highly, highly trained leather technician to attain maximum suppleness. And we, of course, then infuse that leather with a lot of different oils, some of which are very, very expensive, to create a very, very soft finish. And then finally, after that, it's milled at the end to further soften and make the leather supple and plump. And then we have nubuck or suede finish. And that's just like nubuck leather. It just has a snuffed grain on the top. So it's soft, it's pliable, and it has a velvety touch to the top of that. And it can be used for any type of leather goods, but you kind of have to look out for nubuck because they can, just like suede leather, it can sort of pick up dirt and things like that. And they have a tendency to absorb oil. One of the things about any type of nubuck leather is you have to worry about crocking, which is the dye coming off a little bit. So, it's better for footwear, in my opinion, and things that are not going to be rubbing on other types of fabric or leather, to have any type of the dyes come off.
Okay, awesome. Can I ask a quick question about the glazed one, just to kind of back up for one quick second? So I saw on the website that it mentioned reglazing, and then you also mentioned this French Bombay, and I kind of looked into that, and obviously there's a big machine involved, but I also saw that at one point you had made a comment online, somewhere I found it, where you said that you saw somebody do it with a pan on a stove.
No. Okay. All right. So in order to reglaze alligator leather, let's talk about that first. Okay. So throughout Europe, anybody who's making glazed alligator products, they have glazing jack, just like I have in my tannery. Okay. So if you are making a lot of alligator products and you are making glaze finish in those products, or you're using glaze finish, you will, as a leather goods maker, your first step is you're going to put your weights on your alligator. Okay. You're going to put weights on it to weigh it down. And then you're going to put your pattern on your skin and you're going to cut it out with an X-Acto knife kind of thing or whatever, like a very, very sharp knife. After that, you're going to take that piece of alligator and you're going to run it through either a splitting machine or a skiving machine. Most people in Europe, these fine leather goods crafters who've been doing this again for generations, they do it with a skiving machine. They do it with a Bell skiver, a Fortuna skiving machine. It is the most dangerous operation because you can completely, if you've cut out a whole cover of a bag and you're running it through there and you have one little mishap, you got to be very, very careful. You can just kill the whole cover. I mean, it's done.
Oh.
So it's, it takes some practice, I think. So that's the second thing. They're going to skive it very, very thin.
Okay.
The next step is they're going to reglaze it. So they're going to take it and they're going to run it through their glazing machine, their glazing jack, just like I've done. And then after that, they're going to put it in I don't even know what this machine is called, but it's like a flattener. It's like a press. Like they put this thing in, it's really got shiny, shiny metal on the top and the bottom and it's heated. But I call it the pancake machine because basically they put that piece of leather in it. And if it's got any type of curls or weird places that flip up, they put it in this machine and it makes it completely flat.
Okay.
Then they Bombay it. Now, I'm going to let everybody in on a giant secret. It sounds really like it's really complicated, French Bombay. It's actually not. It's just heat.
Okay.
It's just heat. It's a hot plate. So they take that glazed piece of chrome tanned alligator leather that they've reglazed. They've split it very, very thin, like paper thin, reglazed it, made it flat in their pancake machine, and they put a little heat under it. And when you put heat under alligator leather, and again, you can do it on a stove. I wasn't saying on a pan. This is where you're getting the pan. You can put it on a hot plate. So if you were to take a gas stove and put a pan on it and put a piece of alligator leather in that, you got to be careful. You'll burn the leather. Okay, you do have to be careful. But you'll see that when you put the leather on that it will get, it will bubble up. That's what they call the Bombay. And what it is it's the chrome in the leather that is shrinking. So as the chrome in the leather shrinks, you get that beautiful convex shape to the scale. But you've just reglazed it, so it's glossy, glossy, shiny. But the trick to really Bombaying the leather is splitting it very thin, because the thinner you split it, the more that enhancement is going to come out. So that's what I was talking about. So you have to have a glazing jack to reglaze it, and you have to split it, and then you put that heat under it to Bombay it. And it's better if it's a dry heat. It shouldn't be a humid heat. It should be a dry heat.
Perfect. Thank you. That clears that up for me.
Okay. You can, even if you don't have a glazing machine though, like even if you don't have that, and let's say you cut a matte piece of alligator or millennium piece or any other type of alligator leather and it's chrome tan and you skive it or split it thinner, you can put that heat under it and get that relief. It'll bubble it up. So, but again, it's got to be it's heat, dry heat that comes from underneath, and you can do it. For those of you who are listening, I would highly recommend you to take a Google, take a Google and look up the episode of a TV show called How It's Made. And there is an episode called How It's Made, Alligator Bags. And this amazing guy by the name of David Weber, he's in his 80s now, but he's a leather bag manufacturer out of New York. He was the oldest alligator bag manufacturer in the country. And he's a very dear friend of mine. And How It's Made actually contacted us and said, hey, we'd like to come into the tannery. And I said, this is not interesting. Let me introduce you to David. So David actually did a whole episode on how to make glazed alligator bags. And you can see him doing the Bombay there on it. So it's pretty cool.
Awesome. That's so cool. All right. So I realize I'm kind of jumping all over the place, and I apologize for that. But I just realized I skipped over a question I wanted to ask you about alligator cross.
Okay.
And it's something that I stumbled upon on the website, and I was like, what is this? Like, I don't understand it. And then I kind of learned a little bit more that you can actually dye it yourself. But I wanted to see if maybe you had some sort of recommendations for that.
So, crust, again, it's a technical leather term, and crust is undyed unfinished tanned leather. It's like a blank canvas. It's white. Our crust, again, is a chrome tanned crust, so it's toggled out flat. Toggling means you're pulling the leather flat to so it's not all like crumpled up, because if you wet leather and then it just dries in like a crumpled mess. Or you can toggle it out flat. We toggle it or tack it out flat when it dries, and then we sell our crust like that. We actually, probably what we should do is any crust that we sell is we should take it, wet it back in the drum again, re-oil it a little bit, and then dry it and then mill it soft. But sometimes we do that, sometimes we don't. So I went to the Shoemakers Guild meeting a couple of years ago that my friend Marcel Marsan was hosting, and it was down in Savannah. And there were a number of leather companies there that had little small booths, and they were trying to promote their different products. And I met a guy there named Greg Carmack, and Greg is the sales rep for a company called Orion Calf. And Greg and I hit it off. I just thought he was just the super nicest person. He's from Waco, Texas, cowboy boot maker, knows so much about leather, super informative. And he showed me this dye that he had. That is a wax-based dye that was developed in France by a very big brand name leather company that I'm not able to say, but if you look at who's doing sort of hand staining on products, you can probably figure it out pretty easily. So they had developed this dye for their own use, and then they started selling it, or this company that made it started selling it. So Orion is a calf company. They work with Tannery Annonay and some other tanneries in France, and they started distributing this dye. So I said, Greg, well, let me buy some of this from you. So I bought a couple of colors, just said, this could be cool, because I was thinking that I could use it for patinaing or making just some sort of hand-stained finished in the tannery. And that's what I was thinking. I was like, wow, this could be cool, and we could see if we could use it in an industrial way to achieve. And I took it and put it on some of our crust and started layering it on. And I would put it in the dryer of our one of our leather drying machines, which is kind of like a giant hair dryer. And I started layering this dye on. And what came out on just a small piece of crust alligator leather was this beautiful blue two-toned thing that I had done. And I was like, this is awesome. Well, both of my brothers saw it and they were like, oh my God, this is whatever. They totally like poo-pooed all over it. They were like, this is crap, whatever. But I was like, it's not, look how cool it is. And then they started checking it out. They started doing like light fast tests on it, like rub abrasion tests on it. And they were like, they wet it. They were like, whoa, holy crap, this stuff's really good. It really is durable. It really holds up really well. And so we started playing around with it, and then we were like, this stuff is awesome. Not for us to use. This won't work in a tannery application because the way you have to put it on, it's too labor intensive for us to do it. But I said, this is awesome. I was like, our customers can buy crust from us. They can buy these dyes from Orion, which are not expensive, and they can make any color that they want, and they can do things that we could never do in the tannery because we don't have the time to do it. And also, most leather goods makers, they're actually going to cut the crust, they're going to skive it or split it, and then they're going to dye it. So they're just dyeing what they need. So they've got the time to do it. You can literally take a paintbrush and dye in the inner scale, the part in between the scales, the crevices, and you can make all kinds of two-tone stuff. There is there is a whole sector of leather crafters out there, like Kate Fiorito at K&M Leather, Laura at Booz Leather, different people, and they are hand dyeing this stuff, this crust, and they're coming up with ways to do things that any luxury brand could never, ever in a million years do, because it's really special. You can paint a person's face on there. It's incredible. And the best part about it is this stuff, you can make a pair of boots and it's really durable. It holds up. It doesn't wash off. It literally goes down into the leather and then you seal it. So someone could buy a crust alligator from me, have a set of these dyes, and never lose an order for a lime green alligator wallet or a purple alligator wallet. And they're able to maximize their raw material by buying crust alligator and then hand dyeing it.
That seems so smart. I mean, I guess I didn't understand that. That's awesome. So I think it would be important to ask. Now, you have to use the special dye. You can't just go get some from what you would typically use on veg tan leather, right?
Listen, I don't know. I don't know how that other leather, those other dyes last or how they react on our crust. I feel very, very comfortable telling anybody to go use these Orion dyes because, number one, they're not expensive. They last, they hold up, and they do a beautiful job. We actually last year in April, pre-pandemic, I'm ready to get back to normal. But,
me too.
Pre-pandemic, we had a dye workshop here. I said, this stuff is so cool. I said, let's invite the people from Orion down and let's have a class. And so what we did is like each person, they signed up for the class. The cost of the class was $1,500, I think, or $2,500. I can't remember. It's either $1,500 or $2,500. But the people got more than $2,500 worth of leather. So like the class itself was free. You basically bought all your dyes. You bought some alligator crust. You got a whole calf skin, French calf skin, a whole one, some shell cordovan, and a ton of other different exotic leathers to play around with and test. All your dye supplies, everything. So we had 25 people that came to this dye class that we held at our tannery. We did it on a all day Saturday, and I think it was like a two and a half day class. So we got people here. We did a tannery tour on Friday, so everybody got to see. And then after that, we taught everybody how to use this stuff. And we brought in Kate Fiorito from K&M Leather to teach everybody how to do it. And it was so awesome. I hope we'll do it again because it was expensive because we wanted people here that were really invested in the leather industry and people that would see value in it. And also we didn't have that many spots and it cost us a lot of money, but we had like dinner party. We had like a fun, barbecue and cookout with booze and everything. But the most awesome thing that came out of it was not that people learned how to dye this leather. It was the collaborations and the camaraderie that people got out of this and seeing people do these partnerships that came to this class. Like Kate Fiorito, she then did a project with Icon 4x4. He does custom cars. If you check him out, like he does like $50,000 and $60,000 cars, and she hand dyed the interior for one of his cars that was sold to some prince, Saudi Arabian prince, which was so cool. Then we had another girl, Laura Booz, who was here during the class, and she did a collaboration with Maida's Boots. She's now tooling leather for his boots and doing like special tooling things.
That's amazing.
And then we had Mercury Leather. He's doing some tooling for Icon for the interior car. And then we had Kate Fiorito. She was hand dyeing SKUs for JBF Customs. So, and then they were all talking about, they were like, oh, well, where do you get this tool? Where do you buy your fileteuse tips? And kind of, so it was just this beautiful thing where these guys were all sharing information. And I think it built like friendships for life. So hopefully we'll be able to do something like that again post-pandemic and do another one of these dye workshops or whatever, because this dyeing stuff for leather goods makers, it is literally the coolest thing because you can take your wallet, and if it was just a regular brown alligator wallet, well, if you sell it for $400, well, you hand dyed it, so now you can sell it for $600. So that's
so cool
artistry. And the best thing about these Orion dyes is they will dye. It dyes any type of crust, whether it's calf or cordovan, and you can use like a glass slicker on it if it's cordovan to sort of get that. Okay. You can dye alligator, you can dye python, fish leather. I mean, whatever it is, you can dye it with this stuff, and it's good stuff.
That's so cool. Thank you so much for explaining that. How are you doing on time?
I'm good.
Good. Okay. Would you like to maybe shift gears a little bit and just kind of give us a brief rundown on sustainable use and maybe like why people shouldn't, I know you kind of did an intro on this, but maybe why people shouldn't feel bad about buying these skins.
Yeah. So, all right, I want to back up and talk about, so in the 1970s, alligators were critically endangered. They were on the endangered species list. They were, I can't remember what year they were put on, but I think it was the 1970s, like 1970, something like that. So from 1970 to 1987, alligators were declared completely recovered. Okay? If you want to stop and you want to think about any type of endangered species anywhere in the world, that doesn't happen. Okay? That just doesn't happen. Animals typically, once they get on the endangered species list, they don't come off they don't come off. It's pretty rare. And for them to recover so quickly is incredible. There is one reason why those animals recovered. It is the value of their skin. Okay? So that is why. I mean, and it was a collaboration between the governments and wildlife agencies, both federal and state, the industry and the trade, and scientific, biologists, conservation experts. It was all three of those that worked together. So what happened is during that time, the Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries wanted to figure out how they could help the alligators and crocodiles recover. So naturally, if you want to talk about alligators, less than 5% of a natural nest would actually hatch. That it would hatch and become a breeding adult. And that's because alligators are not chickens. They don't sit on their nests. They leave. And so those little nests are morsels of deliciousness for anything that lives in the swamp. And they are a favorite snack for raccoons. And baby alligators, when they hatch, they're just tiny little things. They're about 6 or 7 inches long. And they are another little nugget of deliciousness for everything in the swamp, including other alligators. So they have a hard time surviving when they hatch. So Louisiana said, you know what, let's come up with a way to farm these things. Let's see if we can farm them. Well, they figured out that alligators are like panda bears. They don't really breed very well in captivity. So the farmers, and it is a 3-way contract between the state of Louisiana, a private landowner, and an alligator farmer, where the landowner sells his eggs to the farmer. Okay, so the farmer goes on the landowner's property again, and he has a contract, and he has to have a permit to do this, and it's all extremely regulated. I mean, the most highly regulated wildlife trade in the entire world is alligators and crocodiles. It is the only one with those serialized tag numbers, and it is tracked, and you will get more jail time for poaching an alligator or trafficking in illegal alligator or crocodile skins than you will if you rob a liquor store at gunpoint. And that is a fact. Okay, so it's a really serious these wildlife violations. So they said they go in, they take all of the eggs out, 100%. And they do it, honestly, right before hurricane season. So another big threat to alligator nests are hurricanes because it pushes water into the marsh. And if the eggs go underwater, they drown. It kills them. They don't live if they're underwater. That's why if you'll see in nature alligators, they nest up on these mounds and they build the land up. So, and that's to keep the eggs dry. So the farmers go in, they buy the eggs from the landowner at a price of around anywhere between $16 and has been as high as $95 an egg. Okay. And they buy 100% of the eggs. Last year in Louisiana, there were about 600,000 eggs that were sold from private landowners to farmers. That's a lot of dollars put in the pockets of private landowners. 80% of the coastal wetlands in Louisiana are owned by private individuals. And they protect and look after their land because they earn money selling alligator eggs. So keeping those wetlands intact is very important for those landowners because they're earning money from it. So the farmer takes 100% of those eggs out. He takes them back to his farm, and around 96 to 96% of those eggs will hatch. Okay? He's going to have some that aren't going to hatch. He's going to have some mortality. They're going to hatch at a rate that's about 50-50 male-female. The temperature that they set is what determines the sex of the animal, which is kind of cool. So they hatch at about 50-50. That farmer grows that alligator to about 3 feet in length, and he is required by law to release 10% of what hatches back onto that original landowner's property. So if he took 100,000 eggs off, okay, and he hatched 95,000 of them, he has to release 9,500 back onto or maybe he has to release, I know he has to release the 10,000. So he has to release 10,000 back onto that landowner's property by law. Okay. So he's bought that egg. He's paid for those 10,000 alligators, and then he re-releases them back onto the landowner's property at 3 feet. And what that does is that takes that natural nest rate of about 5% hatch rate up to about a 7 to 8% rate. So they are increasing the wild alligator population, putting dollars into that landowner's pocket so that he protects the habitat of that alligator because it means something to him financially. They've created a whole entire industry on animals that would have never hatched, that would have never lived. And they've created a whole industry of it that puts roughly about $150 million a year into private individuals' pockets. It puts it into the Louisiana economy every year. That's just Louisiana. That's meat, skins, whatever. Not considering the fact that all of these alligators that people use, the farm-raised alligators, they're providing jobs for people. So it is a really awesome sustainable use story that protects the habitat of the alligator, which is the habitat, again, of 8,000 other species of plants and animals in the marshes. It's increased the alligator population. So from the 1970s, when there were considered to be around 100,000 alligators in the wild, to having close to 3 million just in Louisiana and 5 million across the United States of America, it is the most it's the most successful, endangered species recovery of all time. And that model of the American alligator has been replicated in places like Africa, Australia, Papua New Guinea, South America, Asia. It's been replicated all over the world. So I want to just tell everybody a quick story about sustainable use, and this is this to me, because when you start thinking about like things that happen in the U.S., like it's tough for us to imagine what it's like to live alongside an alligator or crocodile, because we all live in houses here, we have roads and we have fencing and things like that. But when you consider places like Africa where people don't have those things, it gets very real. So earlier this year, this was last year. Last year, I had the pleasure of going to the CITES meeting in Geneva, Switzerland. And at the CITES meeting, they have all of these side events, and you hear all of these stories of conservation success stories and sometimes conservation horror stories, but this was a positive story. And it was a story about sustainable use presented by a bunch of scientists where they brought in real people who lived in real communities to tell their stories. And it was a story of the Galili community in Kenya, in an area called the Tana River Basin. And if you just look up the Tana River Basin in Kenya, you'll see that the people that live there, they live very primitively. They live in what most of us would call huts, okay, that are made from mud and like weeds or whatever is what it looks like to me. I could be wrong, and I'm not trying to be insensitive, but I look at it and I'm like, wow. They don't have electricity. They don't have roads. They just have, their little community schools there. They don't have Amazon. They don't have Whole Foods. It's very, very primitive. And the people there, they live along a river. And the river to these people is life. It is water for drinking, water for bathing, water for cooking, water for their livestock. It's their means of where they catch their fish so they have food to eat. And it is their means of transportation. The water is everything. And every day the people would go to the water to get water, to collect water for themselves, to bathe, to do whatever. And there were people that were being attacked and killed by crocodiles. And, I think that so many of us have been desensitized by watching Hollywood movies and watching people, you think about people getting attacked and killed but put yourself in that situation, that if it's you and it's your child or your dog or whatever, and it gets taken by a crocodile, those crocs suddenly become the enemy of the people there. They live every day in a struggle against nature. And it's not like a struggle against nature like you and me or people in New York City when they go, oh, crap, it rained today, or oh, gosh, it's snowing. I mean, this is a real struggle against nature, a struggle to survive. And so what they started doing was what most people would do. They started poisoning the crocodiles. So they would have a chicken or something that they would raise, and they would inject the chicken with poison, and they would throw the dead chicken into the river. The croc would eat it. That croc would die. Another croc would eat that croc. It would die. Another croc would eat that croc. And about four things down the line, after they poisoned this one, would die. They were poisoning all the crocs. No crocs, no problem. You go down to the river, you go get your water, you bathe, whatever, you don't have to worry. And there was a croc farmer that wanted to come in and establish a farm in the region. And so he went to the elders in the community, because the elders in the community make all the decisions. And he said, look, we're trying to build a crocodile farm here. And they said, okay. He said, well, I need you to stop poisoning the crocs. And they said, well, we don't want them around. They're a nuisance to us, my sister-in-law got killed by a crocodile last year. We don't want them around here. They're too dangerous. And he said, look, let's come up with a way that's going to work for everybody, because we want to build this farm. So he said, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to come in and we're going to put a well in your community. It's going to be your well, and you're going to maintain it. And I'm going to give you guys, if you want it, I'm going to give you guys a means to earn money to maintain your own well. So they put a well in, and that enabled the people to not have to go to the river to go get water. They had a clean source of drinking water right there at their well. And then they put up fencing to protect their livestock, to keep their cows and their goats and their chickens safe from wandering over to the water, so that they didn't get taken by crocs. And then they got them new boats and said, hey, your boats are kind of old and worn out. You can use these boats for anything you want. You can use them for fishing. You can use them to go see your buddies down in other communities. You can, and then we're going to teach you how to collect crocodile eggs safely, and we're going to buy them from you. So they've now given these people a source of clean water that they can maintain the well themselves, because they've got jobs collecting crocodile eggs, and they can sell every egg to this farm, and the farm will take them and buy them. They're actively conserving the croc habitats. They're trying to increase their croc populations, because for the first time, these people have had the means to earn a living on something and to sell something that's right there in their backyard. So there's more crocs than ever. The people have a better standard of living. They have fresh water. Their livestock and food security is secure. And there's an active crocodile farm in the region. And all of that is possible because of brands like Louis Vuitton, like Ralph Lauren, like Hermes, like Kering, like Gucci, like, or leather goods makers. Without demand for those skins, these people would go back to poisoning the crocodiles, because they're a nuisance to them, because their well would eventually break and they'd have to go back to the river. But now they have a continuous stream of revenue, and they're very proud. And that is the heart of the sustainable use story, because you have to engage the communities that live around these animals to want to go back and to protect them. And I personally feel very proud about that. I feel like it's wildlife conservation is very complicated. And any conservationist, a true scientist, will tell you that he is not pro killing alligators or crocodiles. He's pro conserving them. And conserving them, you have to do what works, and you have to make them valuable to people. You have to make that land in Louisiana, that marsh, that swampland, that you can't do anything else with. You have to make it valuable to the landowner so that he conserves it, so that he actively looks after it, so that he tries to maximize it for egg production and maximizes the wild populations. And the same thing all over the world. So that's a very powerful story, and I hope it will resonate with some of you guys and make you feel good about using these leathers.
That's amazing. That's such a cool story. I guess when you think about it, it's like dollar for dollar. If you're going to decide to buy like bovine leather versus alligator leather, like your dollars are going so much further for conservation if you're buying that alligator skin than, maybe the bovine leather. So
by the time someone makes a piece of alligator into a wallet, and that alligator gets into the hands of a final consumer, when you're talking about alligator, if it comes from American Tanning, I can say this.
Right.
By the time an American leather crafter makes that alligator into a wallet and sells it to their consumer, at least 50 families have put food on their table in some related to that wallet, because you've got the guys who catch the alligator, the guys who skin it, the guys who salt it, the wildlife agents who oversee it, people in our tannery, all the way down the line. That's 50 American families at minimum who have, again, put food on their table. We've conserved a species, and we've contributed to betterment of American families and livelihoods. And I feel really good about that. So
you should, because that is awesome. All right. Well, I've already gone way over what I told you we would record for. So I just want to say I really appreciate you taking the time. Is there anything you want to close on? Anything you didn't get to mention? Or?
No, listen, I just, we're here and we want to empower leather crafters to don't feel scared to work with this stuff. Like, there's so many people out there that will encourage you, and this community of leather crafters is you can ask questions to each other. And what I found is people are really generous with their knowledge and with this information. And I think that's a really beautiful, wonderful thing, because whether you're just new and getting started with this stuff, like we sell alligators as inexpensively as $60, $70, $80 a skin, which when you do the math, it's not that much. And there are more expensive ones too. But you can start out with something very inexpensive and just get your feet wet on it. And we're here to try to support you. I can't sew a button on a pair of pants, so don't ask me too many technical questions. But there's a lot of people out there who have some great resources that they give out for free, and others don't give it out for free. But you can learn how to do this stuff, and you can learn how to work with this stuff pretty easily. But you just have to take that first little step and just try it.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Christy. I'm going to let you go here.
All right.
Just wanted to say have a great day, and thanks for all this information.
Thank you. Stay sane and sanitized.
Yeah, right. All right. Bye.